Hello, listeners. Welcome back to Behind the Bio, where two lawyers talk about turning points in unusual careers. Today I spoke with Beth Henderson, Pro Bono Director for Microsoft. We talked about starting out as an immigration lawyer, going to Microsoft, where she learned about immigration around the world, and Microsoft's incredible pro bono work with immigrant children. Talking to Beth reminded me of the positive impact we can each have in our communities. Here is Behind the Bio. Enjoy. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Behind the Bio, our series that interviews a different lawyer each month to talk about turning points in their career. I'm Julie Owsik Ackerman, and today I'm talking to Beth Henderson, Pro Bono Director at Microsoft. Hi, Beth.
Hi, Julie. It's great to see you.
That's great to see you too. So we overlapped at Temple Law, and I think we've had some conversations about immigration law, maybe around the time of graduation. But it's been a minute since we've actually spoken, so it's great to have you here. I'm really looking forward to hearing more about what you've been up to the past 10 years or so.
Thank you. Yeah, it's great to be here. It's hard to believe it's almost 20 years since I graduated from Temple Law.
I know it. I know. I was with some of my friends over the weekend, and it's hard to believe.
Yep.
All right. So let's see. So for our listeners, we're going to talk about 3 turning points, as we do in Beth's career, about being a judicial law clerk in the immigration court in New York City, about then going to work with a global law firm that does immigration work, and then finally moving over to Microsoft and what you've been up to there. So really looking forward to that. Let's dive in if you're ready.
I'm ready.
All right. So last we spoke, I think it was right around the time actually you were graduating, maybe. And you were, thinking about immigration law. I was practicing immigration law. And so it looks like you ended up doing this clerkship. So tell us, what was your role at the immigration court? What was that like?
Yeah, so I had actually started working for the Philadelphia Immigration Court while I was still in law school. And I knew that I wanted to be an immigration attorney. That was the whole reason I went to law school in the first place. And so I was really focused on how do I get my career started in this space? And one of the opportunities that came to light during my job search as I was getting close to graduation was applying for a judicial law clerk position through the U.S. Attorney General's Honors Program. And so, I figured, well, I've been clerking, as a law student at the Philly Immigration Court. I sort of have a sense of what this role would entail. I may as well will apply for one of these clerkships through the honors program. So I threw my name in the hat. I knew, from the outset, it was a really competitive process. And, I got through the initial round of interviews and the review process. And you can prioritize areas where you would like to clerk, but there's no guarantee that they can match you with a location that's in line with your preference. And so initially they came back and they said, well, we have a spot for you at the immigration court in Oakdale, Louisiana.
Oh.
And I thought, well, that's really far from where I currently live. I had gotten married my final year of law school. And so my husband was pursuing a master's degree at Drexel University. So it wasn't going to be feasible for us to just uproot from Philly and move to Oakdale so that I could do this clerkship. But I thought, well, this really seems like it might be a great opportunity. Oakdale at the time, and I'm not sure if it still is, was a pretty large detention facility. And so I thought, well, I'll get really great exposure to, removal work, for detained individuals. So I gave it a lot of thought, but then I was like, it's just not going to work with my personal situation. So I said, thank you, but no, if something else comes up, please let me know. And so getting even closer to graduation from law school, I then got a phone call one day to say a spot opened up for the New York City Immigration Court. One of the individuals they, initially had offered the position to backed out, withdrew. So, if you're interested. And I thought, well, New York is a lot closer to Philly. Like I can make that work.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, New York City was the largest immigration court in the US. And so I thought, well, I'll still get really great exposure to a diverse array of cases through the New York City Immigration Court. And so I accepted that offer. And so the way the clerkships work then, and I'm assuming it's still the case now, is it's a 1-year position. You work closely with the immigration judges at the court. Um, a lot of, because it's so high volume in our US immigration court system, a lot of the decisions the judges render are orally, but then
Mm.
they sometimes reserve written decisions for more complicated matters, either because complicated fact pattern, complicated legal issue. And so those are the cases that will often get assigned to the law clerks as the ones that the judges reserve for a written decision. And so that's what I worked on for, the year that I was with the New York City Immigration Court was, writing decisions on behalf of the judges, learning a lot about asylum, in particular, defensive asylum applications that would get submitted before the New York City immigration judges, and, really um, developing, stronger legal writing and research skills through that opportunity. Um, I, however, because of my personal situation with my husband still being, a student at Drexel, I was going back and forth a lot
Mm.
between Philadelphia and New York, because I had just graduated from law school and was a judicial law clerk and not at, some big fancy law firm. I didn't have the ability to afford like the Excella, Amtrak. So
Yeah, megabus.
I was taking, yeah, the bus from Chinatown, from Philly Chinatown to New York Chinatown, which is within walking distance of the New York City Immigration Court. So it sort of worked out. But when I look back, I think to myself, wow, that was a lot of just hustling back and forth, but I'm glad I did it because, the experience that I gained through that, was really well worth it, and then helped me, I think, become a much stronger advocate for when I transitioned to private practice after I completed my 1-year clerkship.
So you were going back and forth every day?
Initially, I was, and then it became like untenable
Yeah.
for me, and so I ended up making arrangements with my friend. Her mom has an apartment in New York City, and so I rented a room from her during the week, and then would go back, to Philadelphia on the weekends. And it was nice at the time because we had a compressed work schedule at the New York City Immigration Court. So I would have every other Friday off. And so that also helped make things more manageable as well.
I also clerked at the Philadelphia Immigration Court, and I believe when I was there, there were 4 judges.
Mhm.
At that time, this is around the same time. How many do you remember how many judges were at the New York court? I'm just curious about the size difference.
It was much larger, probably there were at least 20, maybe more than that.
Wow.
And it wasn't just me. I mean, that was also because of the size of the
Mhm.
court. They hired multiple law clerks, and there was a senior law clerk who had already done 1 full year as a judicial law clerk and then stayed on for a second year to then help manage the caseload and the incoming judicial law clerks.
Mhm.
And so there were um, I think there were 4 of us incoming as recent law school graduates, and then 1, like, supervising clerk above us. So there were 5 of us to help support probably about 20 judges, I'd say.
Gotcha. Yeah, wow, that's a big court.
Yeah.
Um, wow, that's cool. So, yeah, so I hear you saying, that the experience really helped you once you became an advocate. For me, because I had done advocacy, at the immigration court before, and during law school, and then getting to be behind the scenes, like I don't know if I can quite put my finger on why. I think it really humanized everybody who worked at the court in a
Mhm.
way. Like just I got to know all the secretaries and
Mhm.
all, and just the judges. And I think it just helped me. And I since have clerked in the Philadelphia Court of Common Pleas too. And similar thing, like, oh yeah, this is a system full of humans.
Mhm.
As especially immigration system can be very dehumanizing, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So it was, I don't know, for me that was part of what was helpful about the experience.
Yeah, and I think it put things in perspective because I don't think I really realized the sheer volume
Yeah.
of the court's caseload until you are behind the scenes. Um, and I think it just helps provide that perspective and that context because when you are in private practice, sometimes going before the court, be like, why does everything feel so rushed or frenzied? It's like because, they have this massive caseload and these expectations around timelines in which to process cases.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of constraints that the
Mhm.
court is dealing with in a process that's already, can be very challenging
Yeah.
because of what you're dealing with. It, can be a life and matter death for the individual who is, pursuing an asylum claim, for example.
Right,
So,
right. And language differences and cultural
mhm.
differences. And yeah, it is a very challenging situation for
Yeah,
everybody involved.
yeah,
That's I like that word though, context. That's a good way of putting it.
yeah.
Okay, so you did that, and
Mhm.
then your next turning point is going to work at Fragaman. And I know a bit about Fragaman, but I wonder if you would just tell the audience about what Fragaman
Yeah.
is and then your experience there.
Yeah, so I actually, between the time of finishing my clerkship and then going to Fragaman, I worked for a boutique law firm in Philadelphia, which at the time was called Steele, Rudnick and Rubin.
Mhm.
The firm no longer exists under that name. But at the time, it was sort of like, one of the well-known boutique law firms in Philly, helping with individual immigration matters. And so I ended up in that position after basically sending my resume to every single immigration law practice in Philadelphia. And they were one of the few to sort of take a chance on, this person because I didn't have an in through like somebody I knew or some other way. I just sort of cold called,
Mhm.
essentially all these immigration law practices and ended up with Steele, Rennick, and Rubin. And it was a great experience because I got to do a wide array of immigration cases, both family based, removal work, and then it was my first exposure to employment based immigration as well. And it was the employment based immigration experience that I developed that made me sort of eligible for even consideration for a job with Fragaman because Fragaman's practice is primarily, focused on employment based, in particular high volume employment based immigration law for, companies of all sizes. And so, I was, had my own sort of caseload when I was at Steele, Rudnick and Rubin, was doing a wide variety of cases, as I mentioned, when I got a call one day from a recruiter in Philadelphia who said, there's this law firm, they're looking for someone with employment based immigration experience. Are you interested in applying? And I thought, sure, like, why not?
Mhm.
At the time, Steele, Rudnick, and Rubin was undergoing some structural changes. Some of the partners I had been working for were leaving. It was definitely a time of transition. So it seemed like the right time to sort of see what else might be out there. And so I applied for the job with Fragaman. I remember, at the time, their Philadelphia office was in One Liberty. It was high floor. You could see the entire city. I remember going into the interview, like a very formal office. I'm like, oh, this is sort of like the big leagues now, right? And so at the time, they were looking for somebody who could assist them with doing perm cases in particular, which, for listeners who aren't familiar, it's oftentimes the first step. It's testing the labor market in the employment-based immigration process. And so I didn't have a ton of perm experience at the time, and I was very transparent during the interview process. I said, I've been doing a lot of like H-1Bs, L-1s, national interest waivers, but I haven't done a ton of perm work. And they were like, you know what? It's okay. We just want somebody who has general familiarity with immigration law and some of these employment, based concepts. And so they brought me on, they hired me, and then it was like hit the ground running because they had developed this huge backlog of perm matters for one of their largest clients. And, it was sort of like jumping right in and learning as I was going along the way, and worked, a lot of long hours, a lot of long nights, just, trying to get up to speed and then working through like these backlogs of cases. But again, like it's an experience. I'm glad I did it because it definitely trained me up in an area of the law that, I hadn't had prior exposure to. And I think then it also set me up for like the next step, which is when I ended up at Microsoft. So.
Okay, I want to hear about Microsoft. Before we get there, though, so Fragment, like, about how many lawyers do you think work there, or like how many offices? Like, just to give us an idea of what kind of law firm we're talking about.
That's a really good question. I know they continue to grow, and they definitely are worldwide now. There's probably hundreds of offices, I would say now,
Wow.
worldwide. And then in terms of lawyers, I don't know. I would probably think anywhere from like 200 to 300, I would think, maybe more.
Yeah,
So
and it's all immigration law,
it's
right?
all immigration law.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
In my mind, I just think of it as like the biggest immigration law firm in the world. Maybe it's not, but that's how I think
It's
about
probably
it.
one of them. Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah. Wow. Okay, so and you were mostly doing the perm
Mhm.
stuff when you were there. Okay.
When I was there. Yeah, there would be other matters that would come in, but the bulk of my work was really assisting with the perm process for their largest client.
Gotcha. Okay, so yeah, so then tell us how you came to Microsoft and what you were doing when you first, got there.
Yeah, so sort of similar to my path to get to Fragaman, I was, working at the office one day at Fragaman and got a phone call from a Microsoft recruiter who said, "Hey, sort of came across your information on LinkedIn. Microsoft is hiring. They have an opening on both their US immigration team and an opening on their global immigration team. Would you be interested in applying?" And sort of similar to the scenario that I was in when I moved to Fragaman. Fragaman at the time was in the process of moving some of their work from their Philadelphia office to their New York office. And so sort of the messaging was like, it's a matter of time before we
Mm,
close our Philadelphia office. And so I knew I was going to have to be making a transition to where my geographic location for work, if I stayed with Fragment, if I pursued this position with Microsoft. So I thought, well, I may as well see where this goes, right? And so I applied for both positions with Microsoft. I got through like the initial rounds of like the phone screening and phone interviews. So they flew me out to Redmond, Washington, which is where their corporate headquarters are located. And then, I had a whole day of in-person interviews with both the US immigration team and then the global immigration team. And so I returned, to Philadelphia after that, and then, got the return call from the recruiter that was essentially like, you have offers for both teams. It's essentially up to you. And I thought, I I've been doing U.S. immigration law for a few years now. Like, it'd be really interesting to start to learn the global side. And so that's what I went for. I said I'd love to accept the position with the global immigration team. And so, the focus of my work was ensuring immigration compliance for the company um, in countries other than the United States. And my
Mhm.
geographic focus initially was countries in the Middle East, Africa, and Latin America. And so I had a lot to learn because like I had no prior experience in terms of like the immigration law framework, in countries like Brazil, where, we would send, a large number of employees for a variety of business reasons. And so, but it was fascinating work. It allowed me to travel quite a bit. I was able to travel to UAE. Do our offices in Dubai. I traveled to Saudi Arabia. I traveled to Brazil. I traveled to Nigeria. And so, it was a great experience. And I'm glad that I, pursued that path. One of the conditions for me, though, for taking the role was to be able to bring my pro bono cases with me from Philadelphia because I had several that I had been working on for many years. They were like really sort of complicated, gnarly cases, and I was too afraid of transferring them to anyone else just because I had developed just strong relationships with the clients and their families. And I didn't want to jeopardize all the work that we had put into their cases by moving it to somebody else. And so Microsoft knew from the outset that pro bono was really important to me. And so I started getting involved with other pro bono initiatives when I came out here, and then started chairing the company's pro bono committee in addition to doing my like full-time global immigration role.
So Microsoft has, is it mostly US workers they're sending to these other countries, or people could be from anywhere?
It could be from anywhere, really. And it's a combination of both like business travel and making sure we're complying with business travel requirements for, shorter term travel, but also the need and coordination with like our global mobility program um, to, send people on assignment for longer periods of time to a given country. And, the individual could really be from anywhere in the world for those assignments.
So then, yeah, figuring out like, okay, in Brazil, this is what we have to do to get some, permission for somebody to be here
To
for.
get work authorization, we want them on this 2-year assignment. What are our options for ensuring, immigration compliance? And then, bringing in tax. I don't think I fully appreciated how many stakeholders are involved when you're trying to get somebody from country A to country B, and all the things that come with that.
Mhm. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I could see how that could be really interesting. Just, yeah, but there's a lot to learn, and yeah, I just personally would be curious how similar the different systems are. Like, what's similar and what's different between the
Yes. Yeah, I
immigration.
definitely developed a strong interest in like the comparative immigration piece. And we would do a little bit of that sometimes, like looking at options, like is based on this scenario, and looking at these different countries, which one has a framework that's going to be a better fit for business needs. It's pretty fascinating.
Wow. And how many immigration lawyers were at Microsoft at that time?
So on the US immigration side, and it continues to grow, they probably, well, currently there's probably about 10
Oh, wow.
attorneys, but then there's also business professionals, immigration specialists, paralegals that
Mhm.
support the function because Microsoft, like a lot of tech companies, has a very large visa-dependent employee population. We attract talent from around the world to work in the U.S., and so the U.S. immigration team is a very high volume practice, and they're really good at what they do. And then on the global side, when I joined, I think I was one of 5 attorneys, and like I said, we sort of had geographic
Mm-hmm.
focuses. But a lot of that work now, they created a larger team called the Global Employment and Migration Team, and so it's a combination of attorneys and other professionals who are focused on providing guidance and advice related to both global employment matters and immigration matters.
Wow. Wow, it's so interesting to me. Just having been, never been in-house in an immigration role. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
All right. So now you've been at Microsoft for a while, and then tell us what happened with your next step as far as the pro bono program.
Yeah, so I had been, as I mentioned, chairing our pro bono committee in addition to doing my global immigration role for, several years. And um, my practice group, the larger practice group I was part of at the time was called HR Legal. So as, the immigration practice, the employment law practice from Microsoft, all under this HR Legal framework. And the head of HR Legal at the time, her name was Deb Stalkoff. She was promoted to general counsel for Microsoft, and she wanted to make a deeper investment in pro bono as part of her platform as general counsel, and asked if I wanted to come over and lead pro bono full time as part of her office of general counsel. And so I thought, yeah, this is an amazing opportunity to get to build out our pro bono program on a full time basis. And so, I excitedly accepted that offer to do so. Dev is no longer at Microsoft. She is now chief legal officer at Cisco. But fortunately, we still have a full time pro bono director position. My program now sits under our chief legal officer. His name is Hossein Nalbar. And so it's been great because I've been able, in the last several years to continue to build and mature our program. I now have 2 full-time pro bono program managers that work closely with me, and we've really been able to sort of expand the scope of our program, since the time that I started in the full-time position.
And what are some of the projects that you're working on that you're, most proud of or most excited about?
Yeah, so, immigration, and I think, that was part of the reason people saw me as a good fit for just the pro bono program at Microsoft because of my immigration background and my commitment to immigration pro bono work. Um, Microsoft is a co-founder of Kids in Need of Defense, or KIND for short.
Oh,
KIND provides, free legal representation to unaccompanied children who are placed in U.S. immigration proceedings. The president of Microsoft and the head of our legal department, Brad Smith, is chair of KIND's board.
wow.
I'm now on the board of KIND as well. And so it's an organization that is basically in our DNA. It's very near and dear to us. And so it continues to be our signature pro bono partner.
Mhm.
So we have lots of attorneys and other professionals who take on kind matters, who serve as interpreters.
Mm,
We'll also do coat drives in the winter, school drives. So we have just a lot of general engagement with kind and a deep partnership. We also host monthly DACA clinics.
mm.
When the program first came to effect in 2012, we would host them monthly at Microsoft's campus in person. when the pandemic hit, of course, we had to shift to a virtual format. So, I'm proud that we've, continued with that work, and continued to serve dreamers in the community who are eligible to extend their DACA status. I think time is of the essence, because, feels like DACA is constantly under threat. And so it's important to us to continue to do the work, to help as many people as possible while we still have the program in existence. Beyond the immigration related work, like I mentioned, when I stepped into the full time role, we were able to start to expand into other areas
Mhm.
and really identify areas of legal need in our community. As I mentioned earlier, Microsoft's corporate headquarters is based in Redmond, Washington. And so it's really important that, I think we're prioritizing the needs of the community where we are based and give back to the community. So, two examples of this are our virtual help clinic, that we launched in partnership with one of our strategic partner law firms, Perkins Coie. When the pandemic first started, there was, a significant rise in incidents of domestic violence.
Mhm.
People were unfortunately quarantined at home with their abusers and felt like there was no recourse. And so the purpose of this clinic was to help domestic violence survivors get access to free legal services to pursue a domestic violence protection order through a virtual format.
Mm.
And so, we did a ton of work just to create that infrastructure and get that off the ground, and continue to offer those services and, are really committed to that work. Um, we also launched what we call our virtual records clinic, to help individuals who are eligible to vacate convictions from their
Mm.
records in Washington state. We know that, convictions can be barriers to employment, housing, educational opportunities. And so through this clinic, we help people get those off their records, remove those barriers. And I think this work is particularly important in Washington state because we don't have a unified court system here, unlike Pennsylvania. And so that means that, every jurisdiction can do things a little bit differently.
Oh, wow.
And so it can make it really difficult if you're an individual who doesn't have access to legal help to try to navigate that. Like, well, I was convicted in this county. How do I figure out? There's like not a one size fits all in this state. And so, we're really proud of the work that we're doing, to build out, that infrastructure, to help people who might otherwise feel like it's too sort of overwhelming to try to navigate all of this on my own.
It's funny that reminds me of your global immigration work, right? It's like figuring out in each
Yes,
different jurisdiction
exactly.
how
It's
to
similar to, I'm like, all right, let's get a spreadsheet. How does this place do it this way? What does this place do? Yep.
navigate.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, that's interesting.
Yep.
Oh my gosh. Well, it has been really interesting hearing what you've been up to. I would like to ask a couple little just fun questions.
Sure.
Where is your favorite place to relax?
Wow. Well, even though I live in Washington State primarily, my children and I love going to Ocean City, New Jersey every summer.
Get
And
out of
so
here.
I'm not
Really?
kidding. Yes, because I mean, the coastline out here is beautiful,
Mhm.
but you can't swim in the water. It's like too cold, it's too rocky, even like in August here. And
Mhm.
it's nothing like the Jersey Shore. And so I don't know how relaxing it is for me because it's usually taking my kids to like the boardwalk and stuff, but there are these lovely moments where it's like we're set up on the beach, we're by the lifeguards, my kids are playing on the beach and I can just sort of like take a minute for myself. So that
That's
that is a
great.
place that's very special to us. Yep.
Do you rent in the same area every year or mix it
Yes,
up?
my cousin has a duplex. It's not fancy. My brother, when she first bought it, actually like helped her sort of renovate it. it's still got like the very like 1920s vibe to it. But we love it. It's within walking distance to the beach, and it's great.
Oh, that's awesome. My parents have a little modest place in Ocean City too, so we go there quite a bit.
Yeah.
So maybe we could do a play date
Yeah,
sometime.
exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. That would be great.
Are you a dog or cat person, or neither?
I am a dog person. When I lived in Philadelphia, I adopted my first dog from the Pennsylvania SPCA. She was a pit bull rescue named Remy. She was very special to me. And when I got the job from Microsoft, they flew her out here. And so she passed away, unfortunately, when I was pregnant with my son, who my son will be 7 in January. But we since have adopted another pit bull rescue. His name is Loomis, or Moses, as my daughter calls him, from out here. He's this big, like 70-pound blue nose pit bull, but could not be any sweeter. Tries to get on everybody's laps. And so I'm definitely a dog person, and in particular, like I have a soft spot for the pitties. So
Yeah. Oh, I know. Someone in my family has like the sweetest dog I've ever met, and she's a pit bull. I just adore her. So
yeah,
yeah, I
pretty
hear you.
special. Yep.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for taking this time with me and with our listeners. If people want to find out some more about you or get in touch with you, how can they do that?
Yeah, please find me on LinkedIn. I think we'll make that available, my LinkedIn profile and in the follow-up notes for this. But yeah, please reach out. I'm active on LinkedIn, check messages, and yeah, please feel free to reach out.
Listeners, it's been a pleasure. We'll be back next month with another interesting lawyer. I hope you'll join us then. Thank you.
You have been listening to All the Things, the podcast from Legal Internet Solutions Incorporated, where we bring you all the things. Whether it's 3 things we learned, hearing from a legal marketing insider, an Ask Me Anything session, or that one more thing we've been dying to tell you all month long but couldn't. That's all the things. Our next episode will be out in a week wherever you get your podcasts. And you can join us for the live events every Friday at 12:30 Eastern on our LinkedIn channel for our live stream where we bring you all the things live.